Mark Werner woke up every morning at the same time, at 6:47, not at 6:45 and not at 6:50, but at 6:47. During the 12 years of his imprisonment, his body had tuned in to this minute with the precision of a chronometer, the biological clock, as the prison doctor called it, although Mark preferred to think of it as a slow, measured, and predictable death. He lay on a narrow bed in cell 4B of the Alpha Building of the Cold Creek Federal Prison, located deep in the mountainous forests of Montana, and stared at the ceiling. The ceiling was gray. Everything in the prison was gray. The walls, the floors, the guards' faces, hope. Mark knew every crack in that ceiling, every fingerprint left by the previous occupants of the cell. He could draw them with his eyes closed. One more day, he thought, as he thought every morning. His cellmate, Thomas Crew, was still asleep. Thomas always slept until the bell rang. It was one of the few privileges in their lives, the right to sleep until they were woken up. Mark envied him for his ability to switch off, to forget where he was for at least a few hours. The bell rang at exactly 7 a.m., loud and shrill, like the cry of a dying animal. Thomas jumped out of bed as if on cue. 12 years in prison had taught him not to delay. "Good morning, Mark," he murmured, pulling on an orange jumpsuit. "Good morning," Mark replied, although there was nothing good about this morning. They went through the corridor with the rest of the prisoners, lined up for inspection. Guard Jackson, a man with the face of a boxer and the soul of a sadist, walked along the line, checking if everything was in place. His eyes were as cold as metal. "It's okay, people," he announced. "Macaroni and cheese is in the dining room today. Try not to choke." No one was laughing. The guard's humor was predictable and dark. Breakfast consisted of oatmeal porridge, which looked like cement and tasted about the same, black bread, and coffee, which was hot, and that was its only advantage. Mark was sitting at a table with Thomas and two other prisoners, Ray and Cortez. They ate in silence. Silence was safer than talking. "Have you heard the news?" Ray suddenly asked, leaning closer. Mark looked up. Ray was here for 7 years, convicted of robbery. He was one of the few people Mark considered something like a friend, as far as friendship is possible in a place where every day can be your last. "Which one?" "The new boss. He's coming today. They say he was in Atlanta, in the toughest prison in the country. The guy's not joking." Mark shrugged his shoulders. The bosses came and went. The system remained unchanged. After breakfast, work began. Mark was assigned to the laundry, a position he had held for the past 4 years. It was one of the best jobs in prison. It was warmer here than in other places, and the work was mechanical, not requiring much thought. Mark could get lost in the rhythm of washing, rinsing, and wringing. It was like meditation. But today, his mind was somewhere else. Today was the day when Sarah came. Sarah was his lawyer, and she came every fourth Thursday of the month. She was the only person outside who still remembered his existence. His wife divorced him 3 years after his arrest. His children, who were small when he got here, were now adults and did not write to him. His parents died without visiting him in prison. But Sarah came. Sarah Morgan was young, smart, and, most importantly, she believed in his innocence. Mark was convicted of murdering his boss, Victor Kane, a wealthy businessman who was found dead in his office with a bullet in his chest. Mark was in the office. His fingerprints were on the gun, and he had no alibi. It looked like an open and closed case. But Sarah knew something that others didn't. She knew Mark hadn't killed Kane, and she was working to prove it. The laundry ended at 11:30 a.m. Mark returned to his cell to change into a clean uniform for the visit. The guards were strict about how to look when meeting with a lawyer. Mark combed his hair, washed his face with cold water, and tried to look like an innocent man. The meeting room was small, with a metal table and 2 chairs. The glass separated the prisoner and the visitor, and they were talking on their phones. It was humiliating, but Mark was used to humiliation. Sarah was already waiting for him. She was wearing a dark suit. Her hair was tied up in a bun, and glasses were on her nose. She was about 35, and she was beautiful in a strict business sense. But what attracted Mark the most was the look on her face: determination, perseverance, faith. He picked up the phone. "Hi, Mark," she said, smiling. "Hi, Sarah. How are you?" "Good. I brought the news." "Good news." Mark felt his heart beat faster. Over the course of 12 years, he had learned not to hope, but he could not completely suppress this feeling. "What's the news?" "I found a witness. The man who saw, who really killed Cain." Mark couldn't breathe. "His name is David Morelli. He worked as a security guard in the building where Cain's office was located. He was fired a week after the murder, and his work records disappeared. But I found him. He lives in Portland, and he agreed to testify." "Oh my God," Mark whispered. "It doesn't guarantee anything," Sarah warned. "But it's a good chance. I will file a motion for reconsideration of the case. It may take time, but we can win, Mark. We can really win." Mark felt tears filling his eyes. 12 years. 12 years in this gray cage, and now, when he had almost lost hope, when he was ready to spend the rest of his life in prison, the opportunity had appeared. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you." "Don't thank me until we win," she said, but she was smiling. They talked for another 20 minutes, discussing details, next steps, and deadlines. When the guard knocked on the window, signaling the end of time, Mark felt lighter than he had ever felt in the last decade. He returned to the cell in a state close to euphoria. Thomas was sitting on his bed, reading an old magazine. "Good news?" he asked, seeing Mark's expression. "Very good," Mark replied. He told Thomas about the witness, about the petition, about the possibility of freedom. Thomas listened carefully, and when Mark finished, he nodded. "That's good, brother. It's really good. You deserve a second chance." Dinner was macaroni and cheese, as promised by Jackson. They were terrible, but Mark didn't notice. He was too busy imagining life outside. What will it be like? Where will he live? What will he do? 12 years is a long time. The world has changed. Technology has changed. People have changed. But he was alive, and he was innocent. And soon, everyone will know the truth. The evening passed slowly. Mark lay on the bed, listening to the sounds of the prison, the footsteps of guards, coughing from neighboring cells, distant screams. He knew those sounds as well as he knew his own breathing. Soon, he won't hear them anymore. He fell asleep with a smile on his face. The next morning, Mark woke up at 6:47, as always, but something was wrong. There were an unusual number of guards in the corridor. He heard loud voices, the sound of keys, hurrying footsteps. The call came later than usual. When they lined up for inspection, Mark saw a new man, tall, with a military bearing, with cold gray eyes. It was supposed to be the new boss. "My name is David Stone," he announced, his voice low and harsh. "I am the new head of this institution. I'm here to clean up the mess. I've heard that there's too much freedom and too much comfort in this prison. It will end." Mark felt a chill run down his spine. Starting today, new rules. No additional privileges. No exceptions. Everyone will work more, sleep less. Everyone will obey or be punished. It's not a hotel. It's a prison. I want you to remember this every day, every hour, every minute. He walked along the line, his eyes scanning each prisoner. I know some of you think they can cheat the system, that they might find a way to get out of here. Let me tell you something. I've seen a lot of escape attempts in my career. I saw people who were digging tunnels, who were making weapons, who were trying to bribe the guards. None of them worked. Not a single one. Because I don't let them work. His gaze rested on Mark for a moment. Mark felt pierced. I'll be here watching. Always. And if anyone tries something stupid, they'll regret the day they were born. After that, the day passed in tension. The guards were more aggressive than usual. The rules have become stricter. Mark could hear the other prisoners whispering about the new boss. Rumors spread quickly in prison. Stone was known for his brutality. His nickname was Stoneheart. He was a man who believed in punishment, in pain, in control through fear. In the laundry room, Ray approached Mark. "This is bad," he said softly. "Very bad. When Stone comes to a place, people start disappearing." "Disappear?" Mark asked. "Accidents, suicides, people who try to escape and don't get far. Stone says it's just a coincidence, but I've heard the stories from people who were in other prisons with him." Mark felt his optimism begin to fade. The new boss was bad news. Very bad news. When he returned to the cell, Thomas was already there, and he looked worried. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "What?" Sarah called. "The guard relayed the message. She wants to meet you as soon as possible. She said it was urgent." Mark felt his stomach clench. Urgent was a bad word. The next day was Thursday, but not the fourth Thursday of the month. Mark submitted a request for an unscheduled meeting with a lawyer. The guards reluctantly agreed, but they agreed. Maybe because it was a legal right, and even Stone couldn't deny it without calling federal authorities. Sarah looked worried when he entered the meeting room. Mark asked, picking up the phone. "David Morelli has disappeared," she said, without preamble. "I tried to contact him yesterday to set up an appointment to record his testimony. His number is disabled. I sent people to his house. He's not there. Neighbors say they saw him in a car with 2 men in suits 3 days ago. No one has seen him since." Mark felt the ground give way beneath his feet. "What do you mean, disappeared?" "I mean, he disappeared. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he was paid to keep quiet. Maybe..." She stopped, and Mark saw the fear in her eyes. Maybe they did something to him. "Oh my God," Mark whispered. "I'll keep looking for him," Sarah said. "But it complicates the situation. Without his testimony, we have nothing. Just my assumptions and theories." "Maybe he'll come back," Mark said, but he didn't believe it. "Maybe," Sarah agreed, but she didn't believe it either. They talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation was somber. When Mark returned to his cell, he felt as if he had just been sentenced to death. Thomas saw the look on his face. "Bad news?" he asked. Mark told him everything. Thomas listened in silence, and when Mark finished, he slowly shook his head. "It's not a coincidence," he said. "Stone. It has to be Stone." "What do you mean?" "I mean, he knows. Somehow, he found out about the witness, and he took care of him. Stone doesn't want you out of here, Mark. He doesn't want anyone to get out of here. It's his job to keep people in a cage. If people start coming out, if the system starts to malfunction, his job will be in jeopardy." "It's crazy," Mark said. "It's a crime." "It's a prison," Thomas replied. "Crimes here are just part of the job." Mark didn't sleep all night. He lay on the bed and thought. His last hope was destroyed. The witness has disappeared. A petition for a retrial would not make sense without testimony. He was doomed to stay here, in this gray cage, for the rest of his life. Unless, of course, he finds another way out. The next day, Mark did something he hadn't done since his first day in prison. He began to observe, not just to watch him watching the ceiling of his cell, but to actively, purposefully observe. He studied the guards, their routes, their habits. He studied the schedule, the weaknesses in the security system. He listened to conversations, gathered information. Ray noticed it. "What are you doing?" he asked in the laundry room. "Nothing," Mark replied. "I'm just thinking." "You're thinking about running away," Ray said. It was a statement, not a question. "I can see it in your eyes. I've seen it before in other people. It looks like despair mixed with hope." Mark didn't deny it. "This is a bad idea," Ray continued, "especially now, with Stone. He catches people who are trying to escape. And when he catches them, they don't come back." "Maybe they don't want to come back," Mark said. "Maybe they'd rather die free than live in a cage." Ray stared at him for a long time. "If you're serious," he finally said, "you need help, and you need information. I know a man, Cortez. He's been here for 15 years, and he knows this place better than anyone. If anyone can help you, it's him." Cortez was a small man with a scar on his face and eyes that saw too much. He worked in the technical department where security systems were maintained. When Ray introduced him to Mark, Cortez didn't look surprised. "You want to get out of here," he said, without preamble. "Yes," Mark replied. "It's impossible. I know this prison better than anyone, and I'll tell you that it's impossible. The walls are too high. The guards are too numerous. Cameras are everywhere. This is not a place that people get out of." "But people tried," Mark said. "Yeah, and all of them are either dead, in solitary, or in another prison even tougher than this one." "Then help me not to be one of them," Mark said. "Help me find a way that works." Cortez looked at him for a long time, and Mark could see the struggle going on in his eyes. Finally, Cortez nodded. "Come to the technical department tomorrow at 14:00. Tell the guard that you need to fix the washing machine. I'll take care of the rest." The next day, Mark entered the technical department. It was a basement room full of electronics, wires, and monitors. Cortez was there alone, working on some kind of panel. "Close the door," he said, "and listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once." Cortez began to explain. He talked about the security system, about cameras, about motion sensors, about electric fences. He talked about weak points, about places where the system was old and unreliable. He talked about how to disable the alarm system, how to avoid the cameras, how to get through the gate. "There is one way," Cortez said. "There's only one way that might work, and it's very risky. It will take time, help, and a lot of luck." "Which way?" asked Mark. "The dungeon," Cortez replied. "There is an old tunnel system under this prison. They were built in the 1950s, when it was a different building. When they built the new prison, they forgot about them. Or maybe they just didn't consider them important. But they're still there." "Where do they lead?" asked Mark. "To the north, into the forest. About half a mile from the prison. If you can get into the tunnels and walk through them, you'll get out of here." "How do I get into the tunnels?" "Through the basement. There is a trapdoor under the floor in the supply room. I can show you where it is, but it's not easy. The hatch is blocked. The tunnels are filled with mud and cobwebs. The air there is bad. And if the guards notice that you're missing, they'll find you." "When do I have to go?" asked Mark. "Not soon," Cortez said. "We need to get ready first. We need to create a distraction. We need to make sure that the guards will be looking in the other direction when you leave. It will require planning." They talked for another hour. Cortez drew diagrams on a piece of paper, showing the location of the tunnels, the location of the hatch, the route to the exit. When they were done, Cortez burned the paper in the sink. "Remember," he said, "if this doesn't work, we'll both be dead. Stone does not forgive failures." "I know," Mark replied, "and I'm grateful." "Don't thank me until we get out of here," Cortez replied. "And maybe don't even thank me afterwards. Just live. Live long enough to prove that you are innocent. It will be a thank you." Mark was preparing for the next 2 weeks. He was collecting supplies: the rope he stole from the vault, the flashlight Cortez got, the food he was saving. He studied the guards' schedules until he could predict their movements. He talked to Ray and Thomas, explaining the plan to them, asking for their help. Thomas was against it. "It's suicide," he said. "You won't survive in the woods. You don't know how to survive. And even if you survive, they will find you. Stone will find you." "Maybe," Mark agreed. "But I can't stay here. I can't spend the rest of my life in this cage. I'd rather die trying to get out than die here." Ray was more understanding. "I'll help," he said. "How can I help?" "When I leave," Mark said, "you and Thomas need me to create a distraction. Something that will make the guards look in a different direction. A fight, a fire, whatever." "We can do this," Ray said. "I know the man in the cafeteria. He can start a small fire. Nothing serious, just enough to cause a panic." Cortez set the date: Thursday, April 15th. It was the day when Sarah was supposed to come to the meeting. It was a day when the guards were a little less attentive because they were busy checking on the visitors. It was the day when Mark had the best chance. The night before the escape, Mark did not sleep. He lay on his bed, listening to the sounds of the prison, and thought about what would happen. He thought about Sarah, who was waiting for him in the meeting room, not knowing that he would not come. He was thinking about Stone, who would be furious. He thought of the forest, of the cold, of the darkness. He was thinking about freedom. Thomas was sleeping next to him, his breathing even and calm. Mark looked at him and felt grateful. Thomas was his friend, his only friend in this place, and he helped him even if he thought it was crazy. "Thank you," Mark whispered, "for everything." The day started as usual. The bell rang at 7 Mai, breakfast at 7:30, work at 8 Gang. Mark worked in the laundry room as always, his heart beating so fast that he was sure the guards would hear him. At 1:45 p.m., Ray gave the signal. It was just a look, but Mark understood. Everything is ready. Mark asked for permission to go to the bathroom. The guard allowed it. He walked through the corridor, past the other prisoners, past the guards, past the cells. His legs felt like lead. He went down to the basement. It was a place he rarely visited, dark and cold. Cortez showed him the way a few days ago. The supply storage was at the end of the corridor. Mark opened the door. There was no one there. He went inside and closed the door behind him. The trapdoor was under the floor, hidden under a pile of boxes. Mark pushed aside the boxes and found it. It was an old metal lid, covered with rust. Mark pulled on it. She wouldn't budge. His heart started beating even faster. What if he can't open it? What if he's stuck? He pulled again, with all his might. The hatch made a grating sound and began to rise. Mark opened it completely and looked down. The tunnel was dark, damp, and smelled of earth and mold. Mark turned on the flashlight. Rays of light pierced through the darkness, illuminating old brick walls, cobwebs, animal tracks. He heard a scream from above. Fire alarm system. The distraction has begun. Mark went down into the tunnel. The hatch closed over him with a thud. He was down below the prison, in the dungeon. The tunnel was narrow, and Mark had to bend over to get through. The ceiling was low, and his head was touching the bricks. He could hear sounds from above, screams, sirens, the voices of the guards. The fire was spreading. Mark started walking north, as Cortez had shown him. He counted his steps so he wouldn't get lost. The tunnel seemed endless, winding, leading nowhere. He had gone maybe 100 steps when he heard a sound, the sound of feet walking behind him. Mark stopped and turned off the flashlight. He stood in total darkness, listening. Voices. "He's here somewhere. I know that." The guards. They found the hatch. Mark started walking faster, almost running. The tunnel was uneven, and he stumbled several times, falling to his knees. His hands were covered in blood. There are flashlights behind him. The guards were approaching. "I see him. There's a path ahead." Mark was running. His feet slid through the mud, and his breathing was heavy. The tunnel seemed to be narrowing, that it was closing around him. Then he saw it. Light. Real light. Not from a flashlight, but from the sun. Exit. Mark was running towards him, his legs moving faster than ever. Behind him, the guards were close, very close. He could hear their breathing, their screams. He came out of the tunnel and fell to the ground. He was in the woods. The trees were all around him. The sky was above him. The air was fresh. He was free, but not for long. Behind him, the guards were exiting the tunnel. Mark jumped to his feet and started running into the woods. Branches whipped at his face, leaving blood. His feet slipped on moss and leaves. Behind him, the guards were chasing him, their screams getting closer. Mark ran, not knowing where he was going, knowing only that he had to go on. On. His lungs burned, his legs hurt, but he couldn't stop. He heard a shot. The bullet missed his head and crashed into the tree in front of him. "Stop, or we'll shoot," the guard shouted. Mark didn't stop. He couldn't stop. He ran deeper into the forest, into the thick of the trees, where the guards could not see him. Another shot. One more. Bullets whistled past him, crashed into trees, into the ground. Then he heard the sound of a helicopter. They called a helicopter. Mark knew that this was the end. They'll find him. They always find the fugitives. But he didn't give up. He ran on, deeper into the forest, until he heard the sound of water. River. Mark went down to the river. The water was cold, fast, and dangerous. He jumped into it. The current was strong, and it was dragging him downstream. Mark struggled with the water, trying to stay on the surface. His lungs were filling with water. He was sure he was dying. But then his feet touched bottom, and he was able to stand up. He came out of the water onto the other shore, coughing and gasping for breath. Behind him, the guards stood on the shore, but they did not jump. Maybe they were afraid of the water. Maybe they knew it was useless. Mark was lying on the ground, breathing heavily, and his body was in pain. He was wet, cold, and bleeding, but he was alive, and he was free. A helicopter was flying above him, its searchlights scanning the forest. Mark got up and started walking, not running, but walking. He was too tired to run. He walked all night, through the forest, through the cold, through the darkness. His clothes dried, then soaked with dew again. His feet were covered in blisters. His hands were bruised, but he was walking. At dawn, he came out of the forest onto the road. It was a small dirt road leading into the unknown. Mark followed it. An hour later, he heard the sound of a car. Mark hid in the bushes. The car passed by, and he didn't see who was in it. He came out of the bushes and continued walking. The second car stopped next to him. The window rolled down, and Mark saw the old man's face. "Do you need help, son?" the old man asked. Mark looked like a fugitive, which he was. His clothes were dirty, his face was scratched, and his eyes were wild. "Yes," Mark said. "I need help." The old man looked at him for a long time. "You're a fugitive," he said. It was a statement, not a question. Mark didn't deny it. "I won't give you away," the old man said. "I've seen too much injustice in this life. Get in the car." Mark got into the car. The old man was about 70, with a kind face and wise eyes. "My name is Jack," he said, starting to drive. "And you?" "Mark," Mark replied. "Okay, Mark, let's find you a safe place." Jack brought Mark to his house, a small house on the edge of town. He gave him food, clothes, a place to sleep. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. "I know a man," Jack said the next day. "A person who helps people who need new personalities, new lives. He can help you." "Why are you helping me?" asked Mark. "Because my son was in prison," Jack replied, "for a crime he didn't commit. He died there, in prison, before we could prove his innocence. If I can help another person avoid this fate, I will do it." Jack connected him to a man who called himself Frank. Frank was a specialist in documents, in creating new identities. He gave Mark a new name, David Morgan. New documents, a new past. Mark was gone. David Morgan showed up. David Morgan lived in a small town in Oregon, worked as a carpenter, and lived a quiet life. No one knew who he really was. No one knew about his past. But Mark knew. Mark remembered. He remembered gray walls, gray faces, gray days. He remembered Thomas, Ray, Cortez. He remembered Sarah, who believed in his innocence. He remembered Stone, the man who wanted him to stay in the cage. 3 months after the escape, Mark read in the newspaper that Sarah Morgan had filed a motion for a retrial. She found another witness, another person who saw the murder. It was a security guard, David Morelli, who was found alive in a small town in Idaho. He agreed to testify. Mark smiled. Morelli was alive. He survived. The petition was approved. A new trial was scheduled for 6 months later. Mark knew that he could not attend the trial. If he shows up, he will be arrested as a fugitive, but he could keep an eye on him from afar. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Morelli testified. He said he saw another man killing Victor Kane. He said that this man was Kane's assistant, a man named James Carter. Carter was arrested, and charges were filed against him. Mark was declared innocent. His sentence was overturned. But Mark couldn't go back to his old life. His old life was dead. Mark Werner was dead. David Morgan lived. A year after his escape, Mark received a letter. It was from Sarah. She didn't know where he was, but she knew he was alive. She wrote him a letter that she left at the house where he lived before his arrest, with instructions to hand it over if he ever returned. The letter was simple. "Dear Mark, I do not know if you will ever read this, but if you read it, I want you to know that I believed in you. I've always believed in you. You have been declared innocent. Your name has been cleared. You're free. I hope you found peace. I hope you found the life you deserve. With love, Sarah." Mark cried when he read the letter. It was the first time he had cried since his escape. He was free, really free. The epilogue. a new life. 5 years later, David Morgan was living in a small house on the Pacific Ocean. He was married to a woman named Elizabeth, who did not know about his past. They had a daughter, a little girl named Sarah. He worked as a carpenter, building beautiful things out of wood. His work was well known in the area, and he had many clients. He was happy. He's not completely happy. Part of him has always been in that gray cage, in that prison. But he's happy. Sometimes, when he looked at his daughter, he thought of Mark Werner, the man he had once been. He thought about how far he had come, how much he had lost, how much he had gained in return. He never got back in touch with Sarah. It was too dangerous. If they had met, if anyone had found out that David Morgan was Mark Werner, everything would have been lost. But he was watching her from afar. He knew that she had become a famous lawyer, that she had helped other innocent people get out of prison. She continued his work, so to speak. One day, when his daughter was 5 years old, he received another letter. It was from Thomas, his old cellmate. Thomas was released 2 years ago, and his sentence was overturned thanks to Sarah's work. The letter was short. "Hello, old friend. I do not know where you are, but I hope that you are safe and happy. I wanted you to know that I'm grateful to you. Your escape inspired me. It showed me that the system can be defeated, that justice can be achieved. I'm working with Sarah now. We help other people who have been wrongly convicted. We help them find witnesses, find evidence, and find freedom. I hope you know that you are not alone. You are not forgotten. With respect, Thomas." Mark cried again while reading this letter. He wasn't alone. His escape mattered. It inspired people and changed their lives. He wrote back, even though he knew it was risky. He wrote it on a typewriter without a signature and sent it to the address Thomas had left. "Dear Thomas, thank you for the letter. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for continuing your work. I'm happy. I'm free. That's all I've ever wanted. Remember Ray and Cortez. Remember everyone who was left behind. Remember why you do what you do. And remember that the system can be changed. One person can change the system. With respect, your old friend." Mark never sent the letter. It was too dangerous. But he wrote it, and that was enough. Life went on. Days turned into months, months into years. Mark Werner was slowly disappearing into memory, being replaced by David Morgan. But sometimes, when Mark woke up at 6:47 a.m., he remembered. He remembered gray walls, gray faces, gray days. He remembered the sound of the bell, the sound of keys, the sound of doors closing behind him. And he was grateful. Grateful for his escape, grateful for his freedom, grateful for the life he had now. Because freedom is not just the absence of a cage. Freedom is an opportunity to live, to love, to dream. Freedom is an opportunity to be human. And Mark Werner, or David Morgan, or whoever he was finally free. And afterward. The story of Mark Werner is a story about justice, about hope, and about the power of the human spirit. This is a story about how one person can challenge the system and win, even if it costs them everything. There are many people in the real world who are in a situation similar to Mark's. They are innocent but convicted. They are in a cage, but not for what they have done. For them, Mark's story can be a source of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, there is an opportunity for change, for justice, for freedom. And for all of us, Mark's story is a reminder of the importance of justice, the importance of believing in innocence, and the importance of fighting for what's right, even when the system is working against us. Because in the end, freedom is not just a right, it's a necessity. and everyone deserves to live in freedom, regardless of what the system says about them.